Good evening, and welcome to The Way Out Show. I'm your host, Dane McCarthy, broadcasting to you from FEMA Region 5, deep in the bowels of the United Police State of Amnesia. Today is March 11th, 2016. The amazing developments in the presidential race in the United States, absolutely out of control in some people's minds. Donald Trump running the table in the primaries, more or less. The establishment have tried to stand up cardboard cutout substitutes for him in Marco Rubio and, of course, before him, Jeb Bush. But these paper presidential candidates have literally fallen apart, almost literally fallen apart, and fluttered away in the mighty hot wind that is Donald Trump. And they cannot stand against him. Even Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio in the debate, not this last one, but the one, I believe it was the one before that, tried to gang up and do a tag team routine like in the WWF against Trump, and Trump just knocked them down either one at a time or both together over and over and over and over again. And now Ben Carson has come out after dropping out of the race a couple of weeks ago and now has endorsed Trump and saying that behind the scenes he is quite cerebral, and he actually used that word, cerebral. And so how much of Trump's performance publicly is just that, a performance, or is it the real Trump? And my guess is that much of what we're seeing is a performance that's deliberately tailored to increase his appeal to the ordinary citizens of the United States, rather than the real Trump, who's probably much smarter than he appears on television. People think he's a clown, he's an idiot, and so he's playing this game. And now he's actually toning it down and getting a little more presidential, dare I say it. Now, whether or not he's going to be our president, well, that remains to be seen. Whether or not he's going to be a good president, who knows? Would he just end up being another puppet of the establishment, the military-industrial complex? Who knows? Now, Newt Gingrich did come out publicly and say that the establishment in the Republican Party was very afraid of Donald Trump. And why? Because he, according to Gingrich, is not in the inner circle. He is not a member of the secret societies. He literally said that. He has not been initiated. He used the word initiated. He's not, so in other words, he's not on the reservation. He's not under the control. And this makes him a dangerous, loose cannon in the establishment. And this could be exactly why he is gaining so much popularity. He's a populist. He's an old-fashioned populist who rails against the status quo, and this is what people want. I think of Obama, who tried to be a populist, or pretended to be a populist, with the hope and change thing, idea, when we saw how that went. Well, it's not going to necessarily go down that way, but who knows. But I did want to show you on the international scene. So I would like to basically talk both about the international scene, as always, and at least focus a little bit on presidential politics. It is a horse race, but to me, of more significance is what is going on in the world stage, and I mean that almost literally, the world stage, and I'll show you why. Because I have another clip from Syrian Girl. Here's where she is interviewed, and her sort of inner wisdom is plumbed by the revelation from July of last year, 2015, when there was a hack into one of the laptops of, I guess, a staff member of John McCain, revealing Jihadi John with the orange jumpsuited victim. You know, you saw him with the big knife threatening in the desert and with sand and blue sky behind him. And it's actually on a sound stage with professional cameramen and even a director telling him what to do, and a green screen behind him. And it looks very authentic. It doesn't look like a fake. I mean, the soundstage looks like a real soundstage. The camera crew looks real. The cameras are obviously professional quality. The lighting, everything is the real deal. And this throws into question whether or not these beheadings were in fact real at all. And you don't know what to think, but we know that this is part of the big show that's being put on. So let's show the clip and then we'll go back and talk about it.
So over the weekend, as you know, we had this bizarre release of a video by the pro-Russian hacktivist group Cyber Berkut, which appeared to show a fake ISIS beheading being filmed in a studio with a green screen behind it. They had the scenery out to resemble a desert. They had professional cameras, the lighting rig. Lot of speculation surrounding this video. Now John McCain's officially responded to it, which we'll get onto. Syrian Girl, who do you think is behind this video? That's the big question that everybody's asking.
Well, we know that Cyber Berkut released the video, and they are as you said, Ukrainian hacking group, but they are pro-Russian. And they have a reason, of course, to hate John McCain, just as Syrians do, because of his support for terrorism in Syria. It's a fact that John McCain has been photographed and supported terrorists in Syria. That's not something that can be denied. And whether or not this videotape came from his supposed telephone, you know, that can't be verified because Cyber Berkut hasn't released any evidence that they actually hacked his laptop or his aide's laptop. And usually, like a hacking group, for example, like the Syrian Electronic Army, would release some evidence that the hack is legitimate, either by showing a desktop of the controlled computer or by dumping a lot of data along with the leak.
Right, they'll normally do a data dump, which we've seen in the past. Of course, as you mentioned, the claim was that it was an assistant to John McCain, that they hacked his phone or electronic device during a trip last month to Ukraine, and that's how they obtained this video, which, if that claim is true, brings the question, why would McCain's aide have a video obviously revealing these ISIS beheadings to be staged? Why would they even film it from way back, showing the video cameras, showing that it was staged in the first place? It makes little sense, right?
Well, it does that make little sense why his aide would have it, and it does, it suggests that they want to pin McCain as well onto it, even though they don't really need to, because it's widely known now that he supports terrorists. But
well, that's what he's denying today. He's claiming that the picture of him with the Syrian rebels from a few years ago was doctored. There's been speculation about that. But there's no speculation about the fact that he was pictured with Abdel Hakim Belhaj, who you remember was the leader of the LIFG, killed US troops in Iraq, then was supported by NATO, by the US during the overthrow of Gaddafi, and is now leading ISIS forces in Libya. We've got a photo of John McCain and Senator Lindsey Graham presenting him with an award, so there can be no denial there that John McCain has indeed met with ISIS terrorists.
Well, and I think there's multiple photos here that we're talking about. There's definitely that photo from the Libyans. Now, there's two photos of him in Syria. One of them is doctored. The other one is definitely real, and I don't think he's denied that one. That one was the one where he met with people who had kidnapped some Iranian pilgrims in Syria. And, the FSA, as we know, are always allied and fighting alongside Al-Qaeda, if not ISIS, and many times they defect each way. But just because perhaps, Cyberbird could made up the fact that they took it from McCain's aides or tried to implicate McCain, doesn't mean that perhaps that video didn't fall into their hands through other sources. And even if that the video itself, it's very well made, and the certainly the man who is supposed to be Jihadi John in the video matches his standing position and his height, and it looks very legitimate. But regardless of whether or not it's real, many experts have said that the ISIS videos that have been released are very likely to be staged. Like, these are normal experts that are apolitical, are video experts that are saying it's very likely that they are staged and a green screen is used.
Which is odd, because we know that ISIS is massacring and beheading people across the Middle East, Muslims and Christians. So given the fact that a lot of these experts have said that these videos could be staged, we had the example with the Japanese prisoners where the lighting was completely off. People came out and said that was staged. We had a group working with the Metropolitan Police in London which came out and said the same thing about a different video. So given the fact we know ISIS is killing people, that's not in doubt, and they want to create this shock and awe campaign to get more recruits from across the world, why would they or anyone else need to stage these videos at all?
It's very interesting because there's so many ISIS beheading videos out there, but none of them have looked like the ones where foreigners were killed. It's only these times where either Americans or Brits or Japanese or Jordanian pilots were killed, where all the stage lighting and everything that comes out. When Syrians or Iraqis are killed, there's plenty of videos there, but none of them have this staged look to them.
Yeah, because in the ones where the American journalists were beheaded, these videos, in every one that I saw, you don't actually see the beheading. You see him beginning to cut the throat, which is what's depicted in this fake ISIS video that we're talking about. Of course, with the examples you're talking about, most recently Palmyra, where they got the children, the teenagers, to shoot the Syrian soldiers, and other examples, you see the full, brutal, gory beheadings. In the cases of the American journalists and other Westerners that are captured, you don't see the actual beheadings on video. You see their decapitated corpses after, but not the beheadings. So again, that's why people are suspicious about this. That's why there's a lot of conspiracy theories surrounding it.
And it's not just the conspiracy theorists that are saying it's staged. It's also experts that are saying it's staged, that are not even involved in politics at all. Because it's very likely that those videos were filmed, and the photos of the beheadings were then attached later to the video, so no one was actually beheaded on film, as you said. And it's very unlikely that after that video happened that the beheading occurred. There's a reason why they just cut off just before any gore was seen. And this is a group that thrives on promoting its brutality. So it's very confusing as to why they would do that.
And also I wanted to ask you about these polls that have come out in recent weeks. In France, for example, there was a poll which showed that 16% of the French population were sympathetic towards ISIS. In the UK, we had a similar poll where 1 in 10 was sympathetic towards ISIS. Of course, they've got this huge social media campaign, 90,000 tweets a day. It's becoming a sort of a rock star status that losers and dropouts can assume to affiliate themselves with ISIS. But why do you think that ISIS is drawing so much support, if not, directly by militants going over and joining them, which is happening, but not in such great numbers? Why are they garnering such support on the internet, and why are these polls showing such support for them in Western countries?
I think it's definitely the mainstream media that is behind the promotion of ISIS. Not Al Jazeera is doing it for the Middle Eastern crowd, and the rest, BBC, CNN, are doing it for the Western crowd. And even though ISIS is portrayed in a evil light, they're also shown as strong and impenetrable, and they're taking things over here and they're taking things over there, and wow, that is giving them far more of a boost than anything else. That's why they're getting popular, because the dropouts and the failures of society who would like to get some power in their lives are looking at this group and they're believing that it to be invincible, and they'd like to carve out their own little kingdom in somebody else's country, which is Syria. A friend of mine who had gone to Syria recently, she's actually Australian, of Syrian descent, and someone asked her, do you have a terrorist problem in Australia? And she said, no, not really. And the Syrian lady told her, well, of course, you've sent them all over here. So a lot of these ISIS people are coming from around the world and attacking Syria. But of course, Syria gets the notion of Syria being ISIS territory is what's portrayed in the world.
And do you think they're going to get this caliphate, or are more troops going to be sent in? Are we going to actually fight and defeat ISIS, or will they continue their rampage across the Middle East?
It's a very good question, because the answer actually comes from the U.S. military officials and government officials themselves, who have said that they want to, quote, contain ISIS. They don't want to defeat ISIS. They never said they want to defeat ISIS. They want to contain it. So they have no goals in actually defeating ISIS. And that can be seen by the sort of lackadaisical way that every now and then they make a bombing just for show, but ISIS is continuing to advance. The only places that the West, the United States and NATO will really fight hard against ISIS are the Kurdish-held areas. Like I said, they want to contain it within certain boundaries, and those boundaries have already been set out in the project for the New Middle East, where they talked about balkanizing the Middle Eastern countries, including Iraq and Syria. And in the DIA reports, it also stated that a caliphate, an ISIS caliphate contained between Syria and Iraq would be beneficial to the powers who are supporting the moderate rebels, because it's going to isolate Syria and Iraq. And also the fact that there's something such as ISIS is very beneficial to those who want a perpetual war. And as George Orwell laid out in his book, many governments seek out a perpetual war because it's a good way to stay in power and to take away their people's freedoms.
All right, we're back. I think it's really interesting, the connection that they're making between John McCain, who represents the U.S. government and is one of the old guard in the establishment, considered a hero by some people. He was captured in Vietnam and spent a lot of time in a North Vietnamese prison, tortured and so on. And of course now he is the godfather of U.S. foreign policy on a certain level, and always supports the military, a strong military. And Lindsey Graham, who was with him in one of those photographs, and they mention him when they're talking about, he is also very supportive of the U.S. military. And so what is this all about? Why would Jihadi John and one of his victims be actually, was he really even a victim? Or are they both just actors? Well, obviously he's not really a victim. The whole thing was faked. This is pretty clear, because you can see in that clip Jihadi John and the guy on his knees in the orange jumpsuit, and he even pretends to cut his throat, and he's obviously just practicing. And it looked like the face was whited over, like he had a white, it looked to me like either the guy had very, very white skin. It's hard to tell when you look at it from a distance like that, but it almost looked like the guy had something white on his face. Is it possible that through the magic of CGI and the high-tech Photoshop style tools that filmmakers have nowadays, that they could have just pasted another face on that face of the man who is going to be killed. In other words, they don't even have the real guy there in the studio. I don't know. It certainly looked like it was possible. So much of what was used to demonize ISIS, to demonize Islam, to demonize people in the Middle East in general, very likely could have been faked. And they mentioned the Ukraine, that it may have happened in the Ukraine. Wasn't quite sure why it would happen in the Ukraine, but this is, again, international politics, very complex, where you have people working behind the scenes to create reality for the consumption by the world population. And of course, this is what George Orwell warned us about, that in the future, as the state grew bigger and bigger and bigger, and the state got control of the media more and more and more, that reality literally could be created. History could be changed on a daily or hourly basis, and history would be a fiction. We think of history as fact, but what if much of we think of as history is actually fiction? It's created. And it's a show. If you look at the movie Wag the Dog, that was about this very thing, in which Hollywood, a Hollywood producer, is recruited by the CIA to actually create a war out of nothing that only is in reality using green screens and shows up on TV in the evening news as a completely fake war that is used for the political purposes. And then at the very end of Wag the Dog, I don't want to give away the ending, but it's worth seeing, the producer, played by Dustin Hoffman, goes off the reservation and says, you know, this is my greatest creation. I'm going to tell people that I was behind this, creating this wonderful fiction called this war. And then Robert De Niro, who plays the CIA man, just nods to one of his colleagues, and the colleague sort of nods back a little bit and then walks away. And then the very next scene, the news flash is that, lo and behold, the Hollywood producer has died of a heart attack while relaxing beside his pool. And so you make the obvious connection that he was executed because he was about to spill the beans, so they had to get rid of him. So this, unfortunately, is the way things go. But actually, it's amazing in a way, because maybe the world is not such a horrible place as it's made out to be. Maybe people aren't so evil and mean in general as they're made out to be by the media, by the press, for political purposes. One group is demonized by another group, and this happens a lot. And it's happened in the past. It's nothing new. So we have to question whether or not what we're seeing on the television is actually real. The good news is that because we have the free internet, the free flow of ideas on the internet. Now there are there's a counter in citizen journalists who have no agenda. They're not getting paid often. They're not beholden to the boss. They can't be fired because they're working for themselves. And so people more and more, unfortunately, are waking up to this reality, this manufactured reality, and they are going to alternative news sources, and they are powerful. They're getting more and more powerful. And the powers that be, the government, the state, has been struggling for years to get control of the Wild West show that is the internet. And they use all kinds of reasoning why, well, we've got to, get these lies off the internet. And yeah, some of them are lies, but it's up to the discerning citizen to gain the education, to have the understanding, have the awareness to corroborate what is real, to differentiate what is real from what is unreal. Very, very important in today's world if we're going to make an informed decision. We need to know all the facts. If even one segment of the puzzle is missing, we are not going to be able to look at the whole picture that the jigsaw puzzle is trying to represent. Actually is. We're going to get a false image even if even one piece of that puzzle is missing. So, well, you might be able to figure it out with one or two pieces missing. That may be enough. But you need to get enough pieces in the puzzle where you can get an accurate picture of the truth of what the real image and what the real narrative actually is. So many aspects to this, so many variables happen in real life. It's, of course, much simpler to just pick a newscaster on television, whether it would be MSNBC, whether it would be CNN or Fox News, and just go with that. And that's what a lot of people do. They trust a particular slant on the news. Some people like Fox. They have a particular slant. And people listen to Fox to the exclusion of anything else. And yeah, Fox probably gets some things right. They also spin some things, and they leave out some things. One of the greatest ways that a news organization can essentially lie is to lie by just simply not giving you all the information. It's the lie of omission. If a major piece is missing from a news story, then it's like this guy that was shot by the FBI and the police on that snowy road in Oregon a few weeks ago. And the major news, he was a member of the ranchers, the group of ranchers who occupied a government building, and they were very unhappy about the BLM essentially buying up or acquiring all the land. And so they decided they were going to take a stand and they were going to occupy. And now they've all been arrested, but one guy was shot and killed. And, well, the police said, well, he was reaching for a gun, so we shot him. Now, this is after the guy came out of the car, after the car was chased down, and he ran into a roadblock, and he tried to get around the roadblock in the car, in this big SUV, but he got stuck in the snow, and he had, I think, 3 other people with him in the car. And he got out of the car with his hands up. But why do I know this? Because there was either a helicopter or a drone, probably a helicopter, filming the whole thing up above. You could see that he puts his hands up. And then he gets shot. But there was no sound in the video that I saw. Now, a couple of days ago, some new information has come out. There were more shots fired than the police and the FBI actually acknowledged. And so this could be problematic for them, because when those shots were fired into his body is crucial to understanding why he would suddenly clutch his stomach. And I think that there's only 2 reasons why he could have been clutching his stomach. One would be that he's trying to pull a gun out of his waistband or a holster that's on his waistband, or to shoot. Actually, there's three options here. He might have been pulling a gun out of his waistband in order to shoot back after he'd already surrendered. 2, he's pulling the gun out of his waistband because they ordered him to. Do you have a gun? Yes. Drop the gun now. And what does he do? He goes for the gun and then they shoot him. Or 3, he's clutching his stomach because he just got shot in the stomach. And from the distance of the helicopter, it's hard to tell from looking at it without sound. But it is problematic for the authorities about whether or not they shot him in so-called self-defense or if they just shot him down for whatever reason. There was a man behind him, too, who shot him. So he may have been shot from 2 or 3 different angles, including from behind. But this is oftentimes the way it goes. I think that more and more the police and the military, the police are getting to be like the military, in which you want a kill. The police in a kill have a much simpler problem to solve if there are any questions about their behavior, if the perpetrator or the person, the victim, is dead. Because dead men tell no tales. Now, the ultimate classic example of this would be the death of Osama bin Laden. And we were told the story that Osama bin Laden was killed in his house by a SEAL Team 6 that broke into his house and killed him. And not only did they kill him, but they immediately dumped his body in the ocean. Well, and then the information is released that he was supposedly still very much in control of Al-Qaeda. You would think that the very absolute top priority would be to keep Osama bin Laden alive, because you have the head of Al-Qaeda in custody, available for interrogation, which they love to do so much, the enhanced interrogation. So, why would that be? Well, the reality, of course, is that Osama bin Laden was not alive at all. And this is probably why they had to kill him, because he was already dead. He had died of natural causes because he was a very, very sick man way back in 2001. And in fact, Osama bin Laden actually had nothing to do with 9/11 whatsoever. And people sort of jokingly describe Osama bin Laden running 9/11 from a cave in Afghanistan with a laptop and his dialysis machine that presumably he would have in that cave, because that's been proven that he was on dialysis. As I said, he was a very sick man, did not have long to live, had Marfan's disease, had numerous other diseases. But yet his death was announced way back in December, I believe, of 2001. But they kept him alive all those years because they needed him in order to keep the fear very high among the American people and the people of the world, particularly the American people. And this, of course, once the word gets out on this, and many, many people know about this, and many, many other deceptive practices, people become very suspicious when they are told that this is the way it is from the mainstream media, from the leadership, and they question, what can we do? They wonder, what can we do? They ask themselves, what can we do? They're searching around for someone they can trust. And whether or not they can trust Donald Trump as president, I have no idea whether he'll be trustworthy or not. He may be just another conniving, very shady character who is wanting to get power. And he may be only working for himself. But what are our other options? Bernie Sanders will probably be shut out of his chances of getting the nomination. I do believe that Bernie Sanders is an honest man, and he has the best interests of the American people at heart. Whether or not he could implement his policies, like breaking up the big banks, putting a tax on every single trade on Wall Street, using the money from that tax to provide free college education for all American people who are the youth who are qualified to go to college. Whether or not he could actually implement that is another story. But he is very much like Trump, and in some ways his policies are not that different, strangely enough. He is left-wing, but Trump is also very left-wing in some ways. He pretends to be a conservative, but if you actually look at his policies, he's really not very conservative. In fact, interestingly, I heard an interview with a couple of Republicans on NPR. This was just today, in which the commentator was trying to get them to explain why, if it came down to Trump versus Hillary, they would vote for Hillary. And they were saying, oh, the interviewer was trying to prep them or trying to prompt them and say, was it because he's a racist? And they go like, well, I don't know if that really, is that important, but we are worried about his policies. We don't think he's a true Republican. And they said, well, I think maybe I would vote for Hillary. And why? And the interviewer says, why? This is a paraphrase. Interviewer says, why? Why would you vote for Hillary? Well, because in some ways, Hillary is more conservative than Donald Trump. That was the reason why this Republican wanted to vote for Hillary Clinton. That was one of the main reasons. He also didn't like Trump's braggadocio and his vulgarity. One of them used that term. He was vulgar. He's not at all politically correct in much of what he says. And so this is problematic for some people. And I don't blame them for feeling that way. He's sort of trying to tone it back now. But at first, I really wondered, is this guy actually even serious? This is just like a joke to him. Maybe he never thought he would get this far, and it really did start out as kind of a joke, as a whim. Just as well, I'll try it, and I've got this extra money, and what the heck, spend a few $100 million and just see what happens. So now he's actually faced with the prospect of literally, seriously being the candidate for the Republican Party, and now he suddenly realizes, wow, I've got to start acting more presidential. I have to work hard at not annoying or frightening people with the things that I say. And I did notice that many of the negative things that people say about Trump are exaggerated or taken out of context or downright wrong. Like for instance, one of the guys said he doesn't he doesn't even know, he said he doesn't know who David Duke is. And I can't believe that. I just can't believe that that. And I remember I saw the clip in which he was asked about David Duke. Now David Duke is, I guess, involved with the KKK, white supremacist. And the actual, what my understanding from what I saw, the way I interpreted is that they asked him, well, what do you think about David Duke's endorsement? And he says, I don't know what to think about it. I don't know him. I don't know what he actually thinks about me. In other words, I don't know him. He didn't say, I don't know who David Duke is. He said, I don't know him. Which means that he's thinking in terms of, he's trying to answer a question, well, what do you think about David Duke? Well, he doesn't have it. He's saying, I don't know him. Now, he did say later that he got a problem with his hearing, with his earpiece, didn't quite understand the question or something. And then he did very emphatically, several times, repudiate David Duke and the KKK. That was unequivocal. And I was thinking that, well, obviously he's going to do that. He'd be a fool not to do that. And then people brought up, well, look at this. How can Hillary Clinton dare to criticize Donald Trump for not repudiating David Duke and the KKK immediately when she herself praised Senator Robert Byrd from West Virginia, who was a former Klan member? And so in other words, I guess two can play that game. If you're going to impugn a candidate for not immediately or instantaneously distancing himself from someone who says they like you, then why not just say, well, look, Hillary Clinton, years ago when Robert Byrd was alive, she embraced him, she was friendly to him, he kissed her on the cheek or whatever, and they were all buddy. So we could hold that against her too. And this is politics. This is the way it goes. You sling the mud, whatever mud you can, and you hope that some of it sticks. And, you know, hopefully you can gain some political points if you sling enough mud at the other person. Well, again, it's like the big-time wrestling, the World Wrestling Federation. They appear to be fighting with no holds barred, you know, banging their head against the mat and flipping themselves around and hitting themselves, punching them, kicking them, throwing them around. And then, of course, after it's over, then they go out and they drink beer and have a barbecue together with all their opponents who were trying to kill each other on the mat, you know, in front of the screaming crowd. So in other words, it's just a show, and we have to take it as a show. So I don't know whether or not Donald Trump would be a good president or a complete disaster. I don't know if Hillary Clinton would be a good president or a complete disaster. The problem is that for some people, almost any president would be for some people, that president would be a good president because their needs are met. Their interests are attended to. Whereas other people, they feel ignored. They feel that they are not getting their fair share of the pie. Their taxes are perhaps raised, or their benefits are lowered, or they're not getting what they feel that they're entitled to, or their military families and their sons or their husbands or their daughters are being thrown into a situation that is unwarranted, unfair, illegal, and it's abusive, and the whole situation is a complete mess for them, and they're very unhappy with the president. Whereas the person who is the manufacturer of weapons of war, they love that particular president because he is taking them to war. They are expending ordnance, and the profits are rolling in. I think what most Americans want, aside from those people who are just looking for a president who will do something for them, who will improve their bottom line, what people are looking for is someone who will adhere to their oath of office, that is to defend and protect the Constitution of the United States and the rights of the citizens that are enshrined in the Constitution by the founders. That is really very, very important in a lot of people's minds. And it gets more important as time goes on, because even though the U.S. Constitution is being cruelly abused and dismembered and chopped away at viciously, it nevertheless still is there and is used on a daily basis by people around the country for various purposes to defend their rights in court, and this just goes on and on. We cannot throw the Constitution out. Remember, one of the most nefarious presidents in modern U.S. history called the U.S. Constitution nothing but a GD piece of paper. And so this is very damaging. The attitude is despicable. George W. Bush took an oath to defend the Constitution and then makes that comment. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Because we have rights enshrined in the Constitution that are not given to us by the state, but that we are born with, given to us by none less than God, America is a very popular place for immigration. We have many, many people from Mexico and the Central American countries and even South America and many, many other countries around the world. China, very abusive of its own people. America is, as messed up as this country is, it is nevertheless still quite popular. And it's amazing to behold, and it's touching that so many people would want to get here. Now, Donald Trump wants to build a wall, but he is between the United States and Mexico. But really, a border, a porous border, is a threat to sovereignty. And it makes no sense to have a border that is supposed to be an actual border that's guarded by Border Patrol, and then not make it impervious to, or as impervious as you can, to penetration. I mean, literally it makes no sense. For people who make fun of the idea of building a wall for $10 or $12 billion, that's what Donald Trump's estimation of the wall would be. Now the wall partly exists already, and how impenetrable that section is, I don't know. I don't think it probably even that. I've seen videos of Mexicans and other people just climbing right over it. But I mean, if we are not going to have a border, then we should get rid of the Border Patrol, shouldn't we? I mean, what is the point of spending billions of dollars to protect a border and then not protecting it? So I actually know someone who is in the Border Patrol, and they said it's incredibly frustrating because you spend a lot of your time just not doing anything because the directive comes down that don't, stop these people. And so they have a drug corridor that's running through the border, through the Southwest desert, in which you have Mexican drug dealers actually walking across the border with machine guns onto American soil and walking or driving a vehicle to their connection to distribute the drugs throughout the United States. And anybody who thinks this should not be stopped needs to get their head examined. So we have to decide what we're going to do. Should we just disband the entire Border Patrol and just lay them all off, fire them, get rid of them all? You might as well if you're not going to secure the border, make an attempt to secure the border. What's the point? I think that you could figure out a way to solve this problem. I don't see any reason why not. And people act as if the idea to build a wall is the absolute worst idea that ever has been thought of in the history of the planet. It's just unbelievable. Well, how about the idea of escalating the war in Vietnam? I would call that a worse idea, way worse. Or how about bombing Libya? I would call that a worse idea. Or how about the decision that was made to bomb Iraq and invade Iraq and depose Saddam Hussein? I would call that a worse idea than building a wall. A way, way, way worse idea. Now, if I remember correctly, President Obama was president while and he made the decision, along with his advisors, to bomb Libya. Why? I've never been given a sufficient explanation as to why we had to bomb Libya. It was supposedly because, Gaddafi was going to kill a bunch of his people. Well, the bombing of Libya actually killed between 50 and 100,000 people. And who knows how many people have died as a direct result of that bombing after that initial bombing was over. You have mass chaos in Libya. It's spreading now to Tunisia, which is the neighboring country, which was the origin of the famous Arab Spring, which didn't work out so well. So it's actually the chaos and the warlords, the fighting warlords who are now struggling for power. That's what happens. You have a power vacuum. You don't have a strong leader who has control over the army, the military, and everybody else who wants to be in control suddenly sees an opportunity and they go for it. We saw this. You see this in any country where you cut off the head and then of the snake and 10 or 50 more heads grow. I mean, that's the classic story, right, from Greek mythology. Well, it doesn't work that way. And so, in fact, I remember Donald Trump saying recently that if the leadership had just hung out on the beach and got a suntan and not done anything, that America and the world would actually be better off. And the world would probably be a much more peaceful place right now if our leadership would just play golf all the time. You know, just give George W. Bush 24/7 vacation, and Obama and all the rest of the presidents for the entire 8 years or 4 years of the presidency. Things would probably actually run better than they actually are running. So, I mean, I think that a lot of people think this. And so they're just fed up with incompetence, trying to fix problems that they don't understand, that they don't have the clue, a single clue as to the ramifications of their actions, the veracity of the information that they're getting. They don't know if it's true information or not. The FBI, the CIA, and the other intelligence agencies are not really about information, they're about disinformation. They're about staying powerful, getting more power for themselves and their masters, and as much as possible running the show and enriching themselves to the detriment of the welfare of most of the ordinary people of the world who are just trying to live and raise their families and have a job and some sort of meaningful work that makes them feel good about being alive. I just heard an interview with the guy who wrote The Great Santini, and it's based on his own life and his family and his father, who was a Marine Corps fighter pilot, who was ignorant, brutal, arrogant, self-centered, very neurotic, and clearly very deluded. It was played by Robert Duvall in the movie, and it was a very good movie. And so this is an example of how the military is very damaging. The attitude that of the character of the Great Santini, it's just, you can feel the pain in that author's voice. I don't remember his name. He just died recently. But it's a very good movie, and the book is really good too. There's so many military families who are suffering because of the ignorance that's out there. So we need to educate ourselves. That's really what it's about. Find out what's really going on. That's all there is for today. Have a great weekend and sleep well.